Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Fish Friday number 208 and we have a good one for you today. Today's fish was inspired by a recent comment on the channel. And I originally was going to do the fish that was talked about in the comment, but then I found this fish and did a deep dive and I could not do this fish. It was so interesting and I was completely unaware of the history of this fish. Today's fish that we're going to be talking about is the Greenland Halibut. Now, the Greenland Halibut, or scientific name Reinhardtius hippoglossoides. Again, that's Reinhardtius hippoglossoides. Sorry, it's a kind of a difficult one for me to say. It is part of the family Pleuronectidae, which is the family of right-eye flounders. Now, you might be asking, rightfully so, Ping, you just recently did a flounder 2 videos ago, and you would be completely right. It was not my plan to choose the same family. You all know that I try and use, be very well versed, but I promise you, after you hear this story of this fish, you're going to understand why I picked it. Now, the Greenland Halibut, or another name is called the Greenland Turbot, or Turbot, but it's really only called the Greenland Turbot in North America. There is a different species in Europe that is called a turbot, which is the true turbot or turbo, and that is the comment that actually inspired this video. Now, I do apologize for the pictures. As you can see, there are very few good pictures of this fish, so I kind of chose the best ones. Still not very good. I apologize on that. Now, this fish is oh, hold on, I'll do it in a second. This fish is a cold water species. It is mainly found at temperatures from 1 to 4 degrees Celsius, which is 34 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit. But it has been found at negative 2.1 degrees Celsius, which is 28.2 degrees Fahrenheit. As the name would suggest, Greenland is very often associated with cold water fish, and this fish is no exception. It's native to the northern Atlantic, Pacific, and Arctic oceans. Basically, it is circumpolar, meaning it is found around the world, but it's found only in those very northern latitudes. But it's actually relatively abundant over there, so I wouldn't actually say that this fish is in trouble. As you can see here, it is a flatfish, or here. This fish is particularly, you know what, we're just not going to look at that fish. It is a flatfish, as flounder sort of suggests, and most flatfishes can be found on the seabed. This fish is actually different. This fish is actually found at all depths. A recent tagging study found that they spend quite a bit of time up in the water column. They are not just found on the sea floor. They're basically found anywhere from the surface, near the surface, to about 2,200 meters, which is about 7,200 feet. But they're usually between 500 to 1,000 meters, which is 1,600 to 3,300 feet. And you can find them at both on the seabed and up in the water column, as I said. Which leads to one of the reasons why this fish was so interesting to me, that we'll get into a little bit later. In terms of size, it is a medium-sized fish, is what I'd call it. They have a max length of about 120 centimeters, which is 3.9 feet. But their average length is around 80 to 100 centimeters, which is 2.6 to 3.3 feet. So there's just some range, but not a very large amount of range. In terms of weight, their max weight is 45 kilograms, which is just under 100 pounds. And the average weight is somewhere between 11 to 25 kilograms, which is 24 to 55 pounds. I do have to imagine that the larger the fish is, the more likely it's female. So, yeah, when you start getting there, but it's a very consistent fish. Like, This is not one of those where there's a huge dynamic between the largest and smallest fish. In terms of coloration, they're going to have this kind of speckled brown color. This fish has been preserved, so this would not be its normal color. This is kind of what it would probably look like more naturally. But what's actually interesting on this is most flatfish, the underside is usually very pale. It looks like a belly, very white, cream colored. In the Greenland halibut, it's just slightly paler, paler. And the more interesting thing, we talked about how in flounders the eye migrates from one side of the body to the other. So they're born with eyes on the proper sides, and then one eye migrates based on the family that it's named in. Well, this fish, actually its left eye stops at the top of the head, which is really bizarre and gives it this very cyclops appearance. That is where the eye stops. This is an adult sized halibut that the eye has just stopped migrating, and that's just where it stops. It does mean that this fish probably has better vision in terms of its surroundings than other flounders, but it's just really, really bizarre. I mean, it has its normal elongated and compressed body shape. Muscles on both sides are equally developed, which is a little different than most other flounders. But this eye thing, this cyclops eye, is bizarre, and how this became the native adaptation tells me that they're using this eye to actually more than likely find prey items in the water column when they actually leave the seabed and going up in the water column. A really, really bizarre placement of the eye, and I definitely, when I heard that it gives it the appearance of a cyclops, I'm 100% on board for that. That is definitely a cyclops eye that I can think. And I almost look at this as if it's like a missing link of a fish. The space between normal fish and flounders, where its eyes like migrating but not all the ways, its muscles are developed on both sides. To me, it just looks like a missing link of a fish. Now, in terms of food, they are an opportunistic predator. Right here, you can have another view of its head. You see the eye right there. But you can see that these teeth, they're actually fairly large and fairly thick. So they're actually a fairly voracious predator, and most halibut are. And the larger that a Greenland halibut is, the more piscivorous they are. But that doesn't mean that they only eat fish. It's actually very locally found. So when Greenland halibut are in an area with a lot of shrimp, their main diet is shrimp. If they're in an area with a lot of squid, they mainly eat squid. Basically, that tells me they're going to eat whatever they can and whatever they get a hold of. And with these teeth in their mouth, they're probably pretty good at eating and holding a lot of different things, not just fish. And they will feed on offal from fishing vessels, meaning they'll actually follow fishing vessels behind them. When they throw all the leftover fish after processing, all the leftover pieces, they'll eat on that. They'll eat whatever they can, basically. Something interesting to note about this fish is that it actually has an unusual form of gonad development, which are the sexual organs. They actually develop two groups of oocytes, which are essentially your sperms and gametes and things like that. So think sperms and eggs. That's not technically true, but I really don't want to get into too much into sexual cell reproduction and things like that, because you're gonna be there. But they're unusual in that they develop two groups of oocytes concurrently. And what that allows them to do is they spawn using one cycle of the oocytes, and then they'll use the other at the next spawning cycle. So think of it, okay, a female can produce 10 eggs. They're probably going to produce, hundreds of eggs. But so think of it as 10 eggs. So they'll have 5 eggs basically ready to go. Then they'll have 5 eggs that are not as developed, and then they'll use these 5 eggs to spawn, and then these 5 eggs by the next year will actually be ready to go, and they're already producing the next round of eggs. And the reason for this is because they actually have very large eggs comparatively to most other fish species. And with the cold temperature, it really slows down their metabolism and things like that. So it takes them longer to create these eggs and, develop and things like that. So if they were going to wait to where all their eggs or all their oocytes would be 100% ready, they would actually only be able to spawn every 2 years. Doing it this sort of ladder style allows them to actually spawn every year, which is why they're actually not that much in danger right now. They're actually a relatively quickly spawning fish species. Well, I shouldn't say that, larger fish species. But that devolves to what I'm going to call the interesting fact on the video, and what really handled this was this fish actually inspired a war that was called the Turbot War, or the Turbo War. And this led into the deep dive that I just spent a long time reading about. It was a truly bizarre thing that was just really out there. There is a complete Wikipedia article on it, actually, that I highly suggest to read. It's actually a fascinating read, especially how it went down. And I mean, I have my opinions on it, and I'll give some of those. But it's not often that you hear about a fish, especially a cyclops fish, that inspired basically a war. Now, it was not a war. This was not like just a complete, drawn out, like, I don't want to, it wasn't, there were no deaths, there was no bloodshed on this, but it was basically an international fishing dispute between Canada and Spain, more specifically Newfoundland, but Newfoundland was part of Canada at the time, so basically Canada and Spain. And what happened is basically the overfished cod population was causing the fish industry, a lot of fishing industry, to leave Canada. And we've talked about how the Atlantic cod had their population collapse. I highly encourage people to go look at that video. It's a very good Fish Friday, and it was inspired by one of my favorite environmental documentaries, The End of the Line. But when the cod population collapsed, the fishing industry was trying to find other fish species that it could substitute for the cod. And Greenland halibut was actually done as a substitute. It was not as plentiful or as bountiful as Atlantic cod, but there was plenty of it to at least sort of maintain some sort of fishing industry. And so Canada started doing that. However, it started being, I don't want to say it was relatively lucrative. I'm just saying that they started trying to do that. Well, Spain was doing the same thing at the time. And Spain had actually used the Greenland halibut fishery for much longer. And because they'd been using the fisheries for longer in terms of commercial fishery, Spain said they had first claim to the fish stocks of the populations around Newfoundland. And basically there was a lot of posturing and back and forth, and it finally came to a head, which is detailed in this article, and so please go read it. There's a whole lot of details, but it basically came to a head when in March of 1995, Canadian officials from a fisheries patrol, called a patrol vessel called Cape Roger, they boarded a Spanish fishing trawler called the Estai. They arrested the trawler's crew and then forced the crew and the ship into a Canadian harbor, and then arrested the Spanish fishing fleet. And Canada said we claimed that the Spanish vessel was illegally overfishing Greenland halibut. And this delved into a whole big thing, and it took a year almost for everything to get, well, it took longer than that. It took many, many years for tensions to go, for reconciliations to be made and things like that. And it's all outlined in that article, so please go read it, about the Turbot War. And all I'm going to say about it is two things. Both sides were wrong, in my opinion. Canada, or Newfoundland, the person leading the Newfoundland posturing was a political activist that, in my opinion, was primarily doing it for political gain, and it worked. Trying to defend local jobs and things like that. That happened. So I don't think Canada and Newfoundland is 100% innocent. However, it is undeniable that the Spanish vessel Esti was using an illegal net by international fishing standards, and more than likely, because they were using illegal nets, were probably overfishing beyond what they're supposed to do. Again, we can go all into my opinions on the international fishing industry, where everyone is doing illegal stuff. I don't care, especially if they're in international waters. That happens. So both sides were wrong on that one, but please go read this article, the Turbot War. It was an awesome read, and definitely at least going to give you an hour of enjoyment, I think. But thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you do. I'd really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. Loving those comments. Loving still that I'm putting out these videos. If you'd like to support the channel, please click the link down below. It is by no means expected, but very much appreciated regardless. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones. And peace.